In this video, I'm going to show you how to do GUI programming with Java using the NetBeans IDE and the GUI builder. Okay, so to get started, we want to create a new project, a Java application, and we're going to call this test GUI. And what we'll do here is create this little program that collects demographic information, the username, and then displays it on another screen. So we'll actually build two different screens, and we'll build a model to hold the data because usually you put data into a model. So the first thing we need to do then is create a Java class for the model. We'll call it demographics model. Okay. And in the demographics model, we're just going to have a private string username. And then we can actually insert some getters and setters for this. So getter, username, okay. And then we can actually generate a setter for this as well. Insert code, setter, username, okay. All right, so we've got our demographics model, and we can create a constructor for this as well. So insert code, constructor, and we're not going to pass the name in as the model, so it's just going to be, actually at this point, that's just a default constructor. So maybe we didn't even need to do that. Anyhow, let's now create a GUI frame, a window where we can ask the user to input their name. So to do this, you create a JFrame form. And forms are sort of this term that are about windows that the user can interact with, and it inherits from the Java frame. So create a new JFrame. We're going to call this data collection frame. Okay. And once we actually create this, you'll see that this is a little bit different. So if we look at our demographics model, we have the source tab that we're in. When we're in the JFrame window, we have the source and the design tab. This is the design view, so it shows me the frame as it will appear on screen. And I can grab it and I can resize it and so on. So what I want to do on here is add a label. And if we just click in here once, actually, if we click over here, the properties for the frame are shown over here in the bottom right. And so the text for this label right now is JLabel1, and we want it to say what is going on here. Okay, so the text for this, we want it to say name. There we go. Something funny was happening with my keyboard there. Okay, so once we do that, now we have a label that says name. Labels aren't very exciting. They don't really do very much. So we want to add a text field that the user can type in. And we're going to give this a good variable name. So we'll right-click on here, change variable name. We'll call this JNameTextField. Okay. And we want this initially just to be empty. Okay, all right. Now, once we make it empty, though, it tends to get squished, and so we want to stretch it out so somebody actually has space to put their name in it. So now we have a label and a text field for somebody to put stuff in, and we also want a button to say, you know, okay, we're done. Typical okay button placement is the bottom right of the window. Okay, and so we'll change the text on this to say okay. And we'll also change this button variable name to be JButton, J OK button. And the J is a way of denoting that this is a Java widget. And so we often like to put what kind of widget, so in this case a button, in the variable name just so we know what this is. So notice the JName text field, that's a text field. JName label, that's a label. That's labels text that the user can't change while the program is running. Okay, so we have this window that's been designed, and if we click on source, we can actually see the source code for this window. So it's in our package, it's got a name, it extends JFrame, so you now know that means that it inherits some properties from the Swing, which is Java's GUI toolkit, JFrame object. And so there is a constructor here, and the constructor calls a method, and the method is called initComponents. So this is code that NetBeans has created for us, Java code that NetBeans created to basically build all that stuff that we just designed by dragging and dropping. And this code is down here. It's under here in this area that says generated code. And we can actually click on this plus sign and see what it did. So you can see here it created a label, a text field, a button, and then initialize some stuff. And then it does all this crazy code here that you really don't want to get into too much. It's all about laying out these things on the frame. And this last command here is pack, which says actually show it, put it on the frame. And so you'll notice that this is all gray. You cannot change any of this code. It's automatically generated and you can't edit it. You can select it and copy it if you wanted to copy code out of here, but you cannot edit it and change it. Okay, and so typically you just want to keep that hidden because that keeps it out of the way. So if you close it by clicking that plus sign, it hides it. You'll also notice down here that there are variables. So the variables that were created, the JName label, JText field, JOK button, this is where the code is that actually creates them. Now the other thing is that there's automatically created a main method here, and we're not going to be running this screen by itself. So we can actually get rid of this automatically created main method. I'm just going to delete it. We don't need it. Okay, so we've got this frame, and maybe we actually want to make it do something. So let's go back to our test GUI program. And what we can do here is we can create an instance of our data collection frame. So we do data collection frame, which is the JFrame class we just created. My frame equals new data collection frame. So that's it. This is just like creating a turtle. Now this creates the frame, but it doesn't actually make it appear on screen. We have to do one more thing to make that happen. So we say myFrame.set visible true, and that's it. So right now we should be able to run this and see our frame. It's not going to do much, but we should be able to see it. So let's test it out. There we go. Okay, so now you can see we have a frame, we can type stuff in it, and we can click this OK button. It doesn't do anything. So it's not very interesting yet, but it's running. Okay, so now what we want to do is create another frame, which will be our end frame. So we'll click on our packages, we say new JFrame form, and this we'll call end frame. Okay. And on this frame, we are just going to have a label, and we are going to say that this label initially can just say welcome, and we'll call this the welcome label as the variable name, JWelcome label. Okay. And maybe just to make this cool, we can do things like play with the font. So there's lots of different properties in here that you can play with. And one thing to note, if you look at the properties of something like a label, is that the things that you commonly change are at the top. So things like what's the colors, the font, the alignment, what text is on there, that kind of thing. We could actually add tooltip text so that if you hover over it, it says something. In this case, we're going to play with we'll just make this a really big, there we go. All right, welcome. Maybe that's too big because we want to be able to add a name to it, so we'll do that. Okay, so that's our second frame. Now, what we want to have happen is we want this frame to open when we close the other frame. And so what we need to do is we need to put links for both frames into the model, and we need to pass the model around. Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. We're going to go to our main frame, and first we're going to create a model because we haven't created a model. Let's say demographics model, my model equals new demographics model. Okay. And then we're going to pass this model off to the data collection frame. So once we do that, now we get an error because the data collection frame constructor isn't expecting a model, but we can say create constructor that takes that. We click on that. Now if we look at our data collection frame, we'll note that, oh, actually we didn't want to do that. That's not a good idea because we need this init components, but that's okay. Here's what we'll do. We'll get rid of this throw blah, which it does whenever you ask it to generate new code. Okay. So now in here we need a way to hold this model. So demographics, model, my model. And here we say this dot my model equals my model. So we've created a way to refer to the model throughout this class. We've passed in the model in the constructor and we assign it, and we need to do the init components, which will do all of the stuff on the frame and make it visible. Okay, so we can go back to our design, and now what we want to do is when we click the OK button, we want to open the other frame, the end frame. So if we just double click on the OK button, we actually get NetBeans creating a method for us. It's JOK button action performed. This is the name of the method, and it'll pass in information in the form of this Java AWT event action event parameter. So it does this for us automatically, and we don't really need to worry about the information being passed in this case. All we know is we get here if the user clicked the OK button, and in this case, what we want to do now is open up the end frame. So we can say end frame, my end frame equals new end frame, and then my end frame dot set visible to true. Okay, so this will make that the other frame visible, and then we want to make this, the data collection frame, not visible. So this dot set visible, actually we don't want to make it, we actually want to just call dispose, which will make this frame go away. Now, we want to pass around the model that's going to hold the information. So we are going to do the same thing here that we did with the other one. So we're going to pass the model through when we create the end frame. Now again, Java's going to say, wait a second, the constructor for end frame doesn't take a model. So we'll say, well, create one. And now if we go to end frame, we're just going to have the exact same thing happen that happened when we changed the constructor here. So now we have two different constructors here, and we're going to get rid of this. And again, we're going to create a placeholder for our model. So demographics model, my model, and again, we'll pass it in. This dot my model equals my model. Okay, and then we have to also call init components so that everything gets drawn. Okay, so we have two frames, we should move from one to another, and we have a model that's being passed. We're not actually using the model yet, but let's run this and see how it works. Okay, so here's our frame. We can type stuff in here. We can say OK, and you can see now we got to the other frame. But we're still not getting the name that was typed in passed over here, and that's the last thing we want to do, just to demonstrate how you pass information around from window to window. And so what we need to do is in the data collection frame, the OK button, before we pass the model through, we actually want to add text into our model. So we created a getter and a setter in the demographics model for the name. So let's make use of those. So if we type my model dot, we have the getter and the setter. So on this frame where we collect the data, we actually want to set what the username is. And so we need to get the username. And we know that the username was typed into the text field, and it's this JName text field. So we can say JName text field dot, and then we can do get text. Okay, and that gets the text that the user has typed. Okay, and it puts it into this part here, saves it in our model. Then we pass the model to the end frame. Now over in the end frame, we have passed in the model here. And so after the init components, which will actually create the labels and everything else that's on the window, we can edit the labels that are there. So on the end frame, we have our JWelcome label, and so we can do JWelcome label. Oh, there we go, dot set text. Okay, and here we can do something like this: welcome, comma, space, and then we can concatenate, and now we can get stuff out of the model. So my model dot get username, and that will return a string, and it will concatenate it with the welcome, and that should show. Okay, so let's now test this. Okay, so now if I type my name, it says welcome Celine. Okay, so what you've seen is a project that has a starting class with a main method that basically sets up the model and sets up the very first frame or window that needs to be shown to the user and passes the model into that frame and then sets the frame to be true. Basically, the idea is you put your data in a model and you pass the model from frame to frame. You wouldn't want to pass individual pieces of information. You just put all the information that you need to save for anything in your application into the model and pass that model around from window to window. And then we have two windows. We have our data collection window, which looks like this, very simple: label, text field, and a button. And then we have the other window, which is our end frame, which, again, very simple, just has a label that gets changed programmatically. And then we have our model that stores information. And this model is super simple too. It just has a private field for storing the username and getters and setters that we used to pass data through from one frame to the other through this model. So that's a very basic intro to doing GUI programming in NetBeans. There's lots of stuff that you can do here. If you look through these swing controls, these are the standard GUI widgets. You can see buttons, toggle buttons, checkboxes, radio buttons. There's drop-down boxes and text areas and scroll bars and sliders and all sorts of things here. And all of these are things that you can just drag onto your frame. You can set properties, and basically you can then attach code to happen when the user clicks on different GUI widgets in this window. And that's all.